Ella began her new job as an optical assistant with the understanding that she had much to learn. She was given the assurance of the employer that they would help with training and guidance along the way. In the 3rd month of Ella's role, it began to change from receptionist to working in other areas of the clinic where she was out of her depth, not being an optometrist or an optom student. She was unaware at the time that this was the natural progression of her role, but continued with the challenges. Unknown to her, both of the managers spoke Spanish and discussed her performance between them in front of Ella.
Is that thing you asked for?
Thanks. Muy mal.
Oh, terrible.
Idiota.
Ella was trained to use the equipment by 2 separate managers who had conflicting methods, leaving her with the impossible task of pleasing 2 different people who were already in disagreement. As Ella was still new to the equipment, she was still unsure about how to operate it, and mistakes were inevitable. The managers proceeded to discuss her mistakes in Spanish in front of Ella without an explanation to her about what went wrong or how to improve. Then they discussed a new employee, Kate, who was starting soon, who also spoke Spanish, and how it would be great to speak more of their language at work. Kate began to work, and Ella was asked to train her. She had no experience in the field of optometry or glasses, and wasn't willing to learn what she needed to know to fulfill her role in the organization. She got along really well with management, and they spoke Spanish no matter who was around them. Arriving late for work was no problem, and leaving work early became a normal routine for Kate, while management continued to turn a blind eye. The boss continued to give her more responsibility and perks, like having first choice at choosing her shifts on the roster and being allowed as much leave as she needed. While Ella had been there much longer and worked harder than Kate, the impending promotion had already been assigned to Kate, disregarding any fair competition Ella had hoped for. Ella felt unappreciated and frustrated with management for the lack of fairness and consistency among her co-workers. She felt she couldn't have a conversation with her managers as she didn't speak Spanish and didn't believe they would listen to what she had to say. Ella dreaded going to work as she felt excluded and disrespected and couldn't understand the reason behind it all.
Motivational justice is a contemporary theory of motivation, which provides insight into different aspects of people's motivational processes and tendencies. It is an overall perception of what is fair in the workplace. We are going to apply this model to the unfair workplace situation that we have just discussed. The model consists of 3 types of justice: distributive, procedural, and interactional. The scenario included all 3. Distributive justice is the perceived fairness of outcome. The way Ella was treated, with Kate being given more intrinsic and extrinsic rewards than Ella, such as respect and trust from the bosses, and further responsibility like organising the roster, was not perceived distributive justice. This is because Ella had been working for longer and was more qualified than Kate, and felt that she should receive the respect, trust, and added responsibility, but instead received no positive feedback or reinforcement. Interactional justice is the perceived degree to which one is treated with dignity and respect. Interactional justice was lacking in this scenario, as the bosses showed disrespect towards Ella constantly. By talking in front of Ella in Spanish, which she did not understand, Ella was made to feel isolated and uncomfortable. This didn't allow Ella to feel like a part of the team, but rather she was made to feel like an outsider who was not doing her job well. She was also not treated with dignity, as her bosses didn't tell her when they thought she had done something wrong. And rather than discussing situations with her so that she could improve, they instead talked about her negatively in Spanish. Despite both perceived distributive and interactional injustice occurring, procedural justice was the biggest influence in this scenario. Procedural justice is the perceived fairness of the process used to determine the distribution of rewards. This process needs to include the opportunity for employees to present their point of view to decision makers, and is important for there to be clear expectations for outcomes. This was the concern to Ella, as the amount and allocation of rewards and respect was not fairly distributed, and this came down to the processes.
The bosses did not discuss Ella's performance with her, therefore not enabling her to know what she was doing well and what she needed to work on. This gave Ella no chance to discuss her feelings, which would include giving her opinion on the new employee that she felt did not work hard or complete her tasks. This means that the bosses were getting biased information about whether Kate deserved the rewards that she was receiving. In addition to this, Ella did not feel her bosses were open to appeals, and so was not able to address anything that she may have felt to be unfair. The reason procedural justice is so key in this situation is because distributive justice is strongly lacking, and the organisational justice model states that when we don't get what we want, we then tend to focus on why. This leads to a concern with the processes.
To improve the injustices and challenges faced by Ella, certain motivational theories have been recommended for the organisation to be considered by the managers. Reinforcement theory states that a behaviour is a function of its consequences. This behaviouristic approach to motivation argues that reinforcement, either positive or negative, conditions behaviour to be repeated in the future. Such a theory can be applied to improve events occurring in the clinic. Under reinforcement theory, operant conditioning can show us where the clinic is going wrong and how it could be improved. Operant conditioning is a type of conditioning in which desired voluntary behaviour leads to a reward or prevents a punishment. In Ella's case, she's being trained to use certain equipment. However, the two managers training her are in disagreement on the best method. When Ella uses either method she's been trained to perform, she receives punishment from disagreeing managers. Following the model, punishment discourages her from performing either method. The problem lies in the communication and confusing reinforcement techniques the managers are undertaking. The result is Ella receiving ineffective training and feeling less confident and unmotivated in her job position. The new, inexperienced employee is promoted and rewarded over Ella for doing the same job but with less experience. This continues to disregard any process of positive and negative reinforcement. Firstly, the managers need to agree on one method. Then, when Ella carries out the same method correctly and to a high standard, she should receive positive reinforcement to encourage her to repeat that behaviour. When Ella does something wrong, negative reinforcement can be used to discourage her to repeat the action. It would also be beneficial for both employees to receive the same encouragement and discouragement for the same behaviours to ensure a sense of equality and procedural justice within the workplace. Operant behaviour is influenced by the reinforcement or lack of reinforcement brought about by its consequences. By reinforcing all employees to use one or both correct methods, it increases the likelihood that she will continue to carry out the method more and more in the future. This would ensure a safe and high quality service, while also giving Ella a clear sense of direction and more confidence in her job.
Reinforcement theory is not without limitations. Strictly speaking, some consider it not to be a motivational theory because it focuses on the consequences. It doesn't consider the state the individual was in when they made the action, rather what occurs after the action that increases the probability it is repeated or not. What motivates someone to take that first action or change in behaviour is crucial, and there are many ideas surrounding this, whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic. Reinforcement theory doesn't explain this. Reinforcement theory is helpful in explaining why an employee is motivated to repeat an action, however fails to explain the employee's job satisfaction or why an employee may decide to quit their job. This is because it ignores the internal state of the employee and focuses solely on how behaviour is conditioned. This is at odds with some other motivational theories, such as goal-setting theory. Goal-setting theory takes a cognitive response and suggests setting goals and intentions to work towards that goal are a major source of motivation. Assuming the individual is committed to the goal and believes they can achieve it, the theory creates a way of analysing what internally pushes a person to take the first action, which reinforcement theory fails to consider. Both theories have their uses, and in this case, reinforcement theory can be seen to clearly show where things are going wrong in the workplace for Ella and what changes should be made to motivate the employee.
Out of the three types of organisational justice, Ella's scenario contained elements of injustice in all three aspects. However, the most prominent was procedural, as it focused on the processes that resulted in the distributive injustice. When Ella felt that she was not receiving the rewards, both intrinsic and extrinsic, that she deserved, she then began to focus on why this was occurring. Applying reinforcement theory is recommended and would have the potential to motivate Ella and other employees in the workplace. Currently, the managers are using rewards and punishments in a conflicting manner, confusing and showing inequality between employees. Using clear rewards and punishment system under the reinforcement to condition future behaviour would create a fair work environment where Ella feels there is organisational justice and an overall more efficient and effective organisation.